Today we will finish making the inboards 3-piece Bradel binding. Last week we had just finished covering the spine. Today we will make the boards, cover the boards, attach the boards and finish the book. Last week, after we finished covering the spine, we put the book in the press. Once we take the book out of the press, we will trim up the covered waste sheets at front and rear to about 25 millimeters wide. That flap will be inset into the boards. To allow for that, we will make the boards out of two 1 millimeter pieces of grey board. The flap, because I've made this book before using similar materials, turns out to be 1 millimeter thick. So we'll make the boards oversized and trim them up later, but that one inside edge we can't trim later, so we need to trim that straight first. So once we've trimmed those two edges straight, we'll connect them to the outer board and then put them under some weight to let the adhesive dry. Just a reminder that this binding is based on an article by Peter Verheyen, and if you do this binding, I highly recommend that you read that article and use that article in addition to this video to make this binding. And there's a link in the description below to Peter's article. If you've got a ruler that's about 25 millimeters or an inch wide, it's a good guide for trimming the flap on the book and also the insert area on the boards. So I just use the width of my ruler to trim that up. But before I trim the flaps, I'll trim the boards to the correct height. Now the height should be 213 millimeters, because that's what I cut the spine stiffener and the connecting strip of paper to. But I'll just double check that that's the height still, and it is. So I'll cut the boards both to that height. It's a good idea to check the boards now against the book to make sure that I didn't make a measuring mistake or something like that. They look good. Now it's time to trim the width of the flaps. I want to leave a small groove between the boards and the shoulders. The shoulders are 45-degree shoulders anyway. So I'm going to leave about a gap of about 2 millimeters at the bottom of the shoulder. At the top of the shoulder it's wider, it's more like 5 millimeters, which will allow this book to open quite nicely. I also want this flap to be square to the book, so I'm just using a square to make sure that it's square to the head and tail of the book. And then cutting into the waist, I'll cut the flap to size and then do the same on the other side of the book. Now the boards have been fitted to the book, I can trim the foredge of the boards. So just put the boards in place and mark the squares at the foredge, so 3mm, and then trim up the foredge of the boards. Of course, I marked the boards front and back before I fitted them to the book, but now it's starting to become important to keep track of that. The boards are covered before being attached to the book, but the turn-ins aren't done except for the turn-in that wraps into the groove that attaches to the book. So there needs to be enough material on that edge to wrap all the way into that wide groove. Now I'm going to trim the turn-ins to 15mm, I think, except for the turn-in at the spine edge. That has to reach all the way across that wide groove, so just make sure that you don't trim that edge up. That would be a mistake. To trim up the spine edge turn-in, I'll turn the paper across and crease it up against that lip and then unfold it and cut to that crease line. I'll trim up the corners at the foredge in the usual manner, 1.5 board widths away from the corner of the book. But at the spine corner, it's a bit trickier. So here's the diagram from Peter's paper. So we're going to have a little tab that will cover the top of that corner. So just cutting as in that diagram, do the 4 spine edge corners, and then we can turn in the spine edge turn-in. And then once that's done, we can attach the boards to the book. So now it's time to attach the boards to the book. Or is it? I was being constantly interrupted this morning when I was doing the work. I had phone calls and deliveries. So anyway, I went ahead and attached the boards to the book. So I just put some PVA into this wide groove, being very careful not to get PVA onto the edge of the boards, because even though this paste paper has a wax coating on it, the PVA can mar it a little bit, and I don't want much PVA squeezing out, or I don't want any PVA squeezing out, and these surfaces aren't very absorbent, so I need enough PVA to make a good connection, but not too much that's going to cause squeeze out. So another Goldilocks situation. The first thing I'd done on the morning I did this work was rearrange the type in the chase of the blocking machine and turned the heaters on. But it was only just after I'd attached the front board that I remembered that I hadn't actually titled the front board. So I had to turn the volume down when I realized that. I wasn't a happy camper at all. There was nothing to be done about the titling on the front board at this point. I just needed to put the book in the press to allow the boards to attach well to the book. Now it's finally time to do the turn-ins for the boards, and we'll just do that like you would on any other book. I did break the paper over the edges of the boards. It just makes turning in a little bit easier. And as usual, head and tail first and then the fore-edge. After I'd calmed down a bit, I realized that blocking the front of the book wasn't going to be a huge issue, and I just put a pressing tin under the front board and opened up the blocker a little bit. So that's done. Now I'm just checking to see whether I should fill in between the turn-ins. So filling in would cover any step at the flap and also hide the turn-ins. And I decided that I'd got it really good on the flap and that the turn-ins were really thin and I didn't need to fill in. I just trimmed a 0.5 millimeter off the paste downs to allow for stretch, and then I'll paste down the usual way. I'll glue out the paste downs and then close the book. Putting down the paste down, I have a little thing I always do. I always hold the foredge of the first end paper and then I just roll the board down onto them. Then I open it up on the edge of the bench and just check for any wrinkles. Hopefully there isn't, because I've used straight PVA. I highly recommend using mix, but with this paper it's unlikely to get any wrinkles in it. But if there are wrinkles and you do need to try and work them out, make sure you do it with rubbing down paper over the wet paste down. So I'll nip the book for about 10 minutes and then I will let it dry open on the bench. The last thing that needs to be done to complete the book is to tip the outside white to the paste paper. So we'll just put a line of adhesive at the foredge of the white sheet, and we'll do that front and back, and that is the book complete. I want to do something a little bit different in this video. Now the book's complete, I want to do a little critique of it, and this isn't about finding fault. It's a way to identify things I can do to improve my binding the next time I do a binding like this, or a similar binding. The first thing I notice on looking at this book is a little thickening at the head and tail at the spine. Now this is hard to avoid with cloth because you can't pair the cloth. With leather you could pair the leather to adjust for that. But the end bands that I made with leather were also a little bit too thick, so they contributed as well. There was that one shoulder that's not as sharp as the other shoulder. Also, now that the paste down is down, I can definitely see the turn-ins, and the book's not pulling closed nicely. So I should have done a fill-in on the inside board. That would have avoided the turn-ins showing, and it would have helped pull the boards in a little bit. I didn't talc the edges, and I've got this slight bleed around the outside of the book, and that's when the camera said card full. So that's enough for today. I've really enjoyed doing this project. I hope you've enjoyed watching the videos. As always, I really appreciate you hitting the big thumbs up button. If you want to be notified of my future videos, please hit the subscribe button and ring the bell. If you want to support me through Patreon and you're able to do so, that would be greatly appreciated, and the link is in the description below. Until next time, cheerio.